In a world where two short-term rental bros come together.
What?
Not in that way, bro. There's a podcast of truly epic proportions where we talk about all things short-term rental and shoot the shit along the way. Welcome to the Co-Host Bros Podcast. Here are your hosts, Matt Codd and Austin Spitz.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Co-Host Bros Podcast. My name is Matt Codd. I'm here with my good buddy Austin Spitz. And today we have Mr. Tyler Krengle from Pacific Property Management. He's going to tell us how he went from 0 to 60 properties. And he's also going to explain his pricing structure, which I find very unique. So him and I have dug into that before. So what's going on, Tyler?
Not much, Matt. Just trying to wheel and deal here in today's market of ample profits. Everybody is jumping into a market that's just generating cash flow like crazy, as you know. Obviously, there's a bit of sarcasm with that. I think there's a lot of competition involved with today's market, regardless of where you're at in the country. And so, as a whole, looking for value add opportunities is really the name of the game. And that's what we're staying busy with currently.
So what? Yeah. Go ahead, Austin. No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
I was going to ask Tyler, just to share with our audience, what market are you specifically in?
Yeah, so we started off in Galveston. That's where the bulk of our portfolio is currently, but we just recently expanded down the Texas coast. Currently, we've got assets between Houston, Bolivar, around Crystal Beach area, Galveston, like I said, and then we're going to be onboarding some properties down in Port Aransas and Corpus soon as well. So really making our way all the way down to Mustang Island and all the way back up.
Dang, you're going down to Port A now?
Going down to Port A.
Awesome.
I used to live in San Antonio for a while, and Port A was kind of the spot for a lot of people out there to kind of go down and check out the coast during the summertime and everything. And so for me, it was kind of a good integration as far as like an expansion effort, because I'm familiar with the market and I know what the demands look like. Whereas, like, for example, Galveston in particular, a big part about Galveston, why Galveston's an attractive market, is because in good years, when consumer spending is up, typically the radius of tenant demographics expands to about a 900-mile radius. When the market declines, your radius shrinks to about a 250-mile radius. And the beautiful part about that is that Houston, the fourth largest metro area in the country, is within that 250-mile radius. So for them, I think that is what makes Galveston kind of a hot market in particular, because it's mitigating that risk aspect quite a bit. Port Aransas is kind of giving me that same notion on the analysis side of the market, where San Antonio is within that radius, even on a shrunken basis when consumer spending is kind of depleted. And so as a whole, Port Aransas is something we're pretty excited about. Same thing with Corpus being right around the corner.
Yeah, I manage. I'm also on, the beach markets. I'm also in Galveston with you. And then, I'm another beach market in Texas. And it's really just, you just basically told everybody where to place their ads. It's just drive-in market. You'll get people from out of state going to Galveston because of the attractions they have. But honestly, you want to just hit people within a 4 or 5 hour drive. And if you're running ads there, you'll get people to pick you up. And it just seems the way for all of Texas market, up and down the Gulf Coast. And then other places like Port Aransas, you'll probably pick up some midterms in the slow season and things like that. You won't pick them up as much as much in Galveston, I don't think, because the prices are higher, right? So people kind of want to be a budget friendly. So what got you started, managing properties and in short-term rentals? And you're a local manager, so I wanted to express that to everybody that he's actually local. A lot of people aren't local. So what actually got you started into this?
Yeah, for me, my end all goal from my background's in risk management finance, and in the studying of risk management finance on our degree plan, we use a lot of examples specific to real estate, primarily because it's really easy to apply financial impact to operational models specific to like risk management principles. And so for me, I always found that very attractive. And so I kind of, through my studies, kind of enveloped this attraction or passion to real estate as a whole. But being very risk averse as an individual, my goal was I don't want to own real estate without knowing how to operate it up front. And so that naturally led into an immediate next step on the path to my goals to basically start operating properties. And I work with a few different real estate owners in the form of, real estate acquisitions, as well as primarily underwriting of acquisitions. So I did a lot of underwriting and between internships and like my first job out of college, primarily on like commercial real estate. But then I had a project that was commissioned for with a capital group where they asked me to effectively do a lot of research on the markets themselves for short-term rentals, because it was really up and coming. And they were asking, what are the good markets to buy in? What kind of data can you give us on that? What does it look like? What kind of efficacy is our capital going to bring to the table and our investors' capital returns? And in that, I was like, okay, like there's a lot of value to be had here. And so out of that, I actually ended up being asked to manage a couple of those properties through some of those different investors. And so I picked it up, started managing them, and went from 3 properties to 60 properties within about a 24-month span. And we were doing a really good job, and we were bringing a lot of value to the table. I think one thing that drives a lot of risk specific to short-term rentals is the uncertainty and the volatility, especially in like tourist markets. They have a lot of seasonal volatility, like even away from Galveston. Let's talk about like Cabo, Mexico, for example. Nothing really goes on in August for whatever reason. So like half of the city shuts down, and all the restaurants and the clubs and stuff, and they let all their employees take a month off work every August, every year, because there's just not much going on. And so similarly, what we tried to do is create a more fixed fee model that allowed for the mitigation of risk specific to that one key pain point, which is the volatility of the performance on the rentals themselves. And so that really generated a lot of traction amongst the different owners across the island. And then that, along with our local presence and everything, I think is kind of what led us to initially get started, not really reinvent the wheel, but create a variation of it. And it led to that growth as well.
So you went from in 24 months. First of all, congratulations. I feel like that's the fastest I've heard anybody on our podcast go to that level at that rate. So that is awesome. And you think that a lot of that had to do with obviously great execution, people that investors building reputation, all that plays into this as well, right? But like something had to do with your price model seems like it's kind of attractive because that might have had something to do with your growth as well. So basically what you're saying is you have a fixed price per unit per house. But like, I guess my question of that is how do you price a condo versus a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house with a pool? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's actually something I get asked a lot about. And depending on which owner you are of which asset, some might say that's too good to be true, and others might say that's not fair. But I don't price it differently for the asset classes. And the reason being is because what we're assigning a value to really has nothing to do with the product itself or the asset. What we're doing is we're assigning a value directly to the services. I would argue, and I could actually provide proof through reports, that it takes almost more work to run a condo than it does to run a 4-bed, 2-bath with a pool. And so it's really just kind of like structuring the systems in place to where it's automating the actual, we call them task providers. So a task provider could be anything like a pool cleaning company to an actual cleaning company, handyman, etc. And by consolidating, the system that organizes those tasks, that system doesn't change in cost based off of how many task providers you have monitoring a schedule of tasks on a given property. And as a result, it doesn't necessarily change the value of our services either. And so it allows us to basically say, these are the value of our services, and this is what we're able to provide across the board. It really, really streamlines things, not just for the owner or the task provider, but for us as well. And they're so favorable of our model, like as cleaning companies and handymen, that we get preferential treatment, even though they're not in-house, right? They're third-party contractors. We get exceptional preferred treatment because they wake up and they know that they've got jobs for the day.
So I guess if I'm a client and I'm interested in your services, is this ever some pushback you receive? Because I'm trying to think, I'm trying to poke holes in this, right? Like, and it's not that obviously it's working, but I'm trying to like figure out like, okay, how does he handle certain objections? What hurdles are you facing versus me having the traditional structure, 20% plus tech fee or industry standard. But I really am very interested in this. But like, what about like in the slower months? Okay, so you don't have to reveal your pricing or anything like that if you don't want to. But like, let's say it's, I don't know, $500 for easy math per property. What happens to the slower months? Do you get pushback from owners where it's like, hey, I had no bookings, like, and I'm paying you $500?
Yeah, I mean, that always happens, right? I mean, like in January, like right now, market's down. It's about to be 24 degrees on Monday in Galveston.
Yeah.
And people say like, I don't have any bookings for MLK Day. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's going to be.
You're not going to.
You're not going to. I'm just going to be upfront with you. You're not
Yeah.
going to have any bookings for MLK Day. And they'll say, well, why not? And I say, hey, do you know that the weather forecast is 24 degrees for Monday? What are you going to be doing when it's 24 degrees? Well, I'm going to be wrapping my pipes and curled up next to my fireplace. So why would you expect any differently from somebody else? And that's the whole point, right? Because especially when it comes to Galveston, every single asset on the coastal market is built for airflow. So the way that the building code is actually built is to create airflow to help with the cooling of these assets and these properties across the coast, which means they get blistering cold when it gets cold outside. Like there's no way to shield it really. And so the pushback I get is typically, yes, when we have less bookings in January, I go through the explanation process. I show them the comps, what's going on in the market, et cetera. And I give them not just the different obstacles that we're running into, but obstacles that the rest of the market's running into. So it's more of a commonality thing, right? But then I typically don't hear much from the owners in July. And so naturally, I'll try to bring that into the conversation and say, like, look, do you remember? And one of the beautiful things about our system is I can see their performance from the July prior to them coming on board with me, and then compare it directly to the July with me. And so I can say, do you know that, in the July prior to coming on board with us, that you made 50% of the revenue that we were able to bring to the table? And so I think at the end of the day, a big part of being a property manager, a successful property manager, is being able to analyze and be an asset manager as well. Being an asset manager is probably the most beneficial aspect of being a property manager, because when you're co-hosting and someone says, this is the slowest January I've ever had, for example, and you can say, yes, I understand, but you also have the biggest July you've ever had. And so that, let's just say that you're breaking even, but technically you're not, because you had, 110% of your prior January or July, whereas you didn't from across the board. So I think that that's something to notate too, that you have to look at in particular when it comes to comparing, because you can get very myopic in those views, whereas you can't necessarily when you are just looking at it for what it is.
Yeah, and I think once you set the standard of like, hey, I just keep saying 500 a month. I don't know, but we're just going to go with that number. You're saying,
well, is it a month or is it a year? We didn't establish that either, right?
Yeah, no, it's on a monthly basis, and I have no problem talking about a pricing structure. I mean, it's $350 a month, but the thing about this is that I think a lot of people forget. And like, for example, if this podcast exists for the next, like 2 years or whatever, and someone comes back on this, it may not be the same, right? Because what I'm doing, right, when I first started out, we were $250 a month. Now I have 6 more different value programs in place that is minimizing the risk of nothing at all. Like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. One of the projects we're working on right now is a direct integration to Furnish Finder, which is a beautiful midterm rental system. Why would I do that? Well, I would do that because, first of all, it's going to minimize the tax burden of a property by 15%, because anything after 28 days in Galveston is not subject to the hot tax. And anything from October through February is typically going to have to be priced well below what the average is going to be between the other half of the year. And so you can price yourself lower on that note or on that pricing structure on the day to day, and make more because you're minimizing the tax burden as a whole. Well, by bringing that integration into place and actually providing that value add, I can now justify higher prices for my management fee monthly.
Gotcha. So those prices are, for anybody listening, those are subject to change. But, I appreciate you sharing that, at least for now. My
Yeah.
follow-up question on that is, what about certain things like holding cost? How do you pay for like things like holding cost of holding a listing? Like you have to do, certain accounting. There's accounting that goes into the listing. Maybe you pay for some SEO or some dynamic pricing. Those things start to eat away at your 350, right? Because you have these expenses. Is that
Yeah.
eating into your unit profit per property? If that question kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So it's not just like a flat 350 a month, just for context. It's incentivized to both parties. So there's an onboarding fee, and it always matches the 1 month fee, right? So we're at the 350 a month, right? Right now. Well, we're co-hosting from a very true sense of the definition, meaning I'm carrying out the management services. Now, one of the things that we're not doing is the accounting. And the reason we're not doing the accounting is because what I'm doing is minimizing the need for it as much as possible. You will never, ever, ever completely eradicate the need for accounting. As much as anybody would love to hear that answer, it's just not possible. With that being said, for example, all of the taxes, the hot taxes, are auto calculated, collected, and remitted on their behalf by the platforms. All they have to do is log into our portal, or their CPA. We typically give their CPA login access, and then they will just go ahead and report that directly to the agency, and they'll keep note of it. We will keep their card on file for stuff like consumables, and then we provide them with all the invoices of those consumables. So we're providing them with the transactions of the different things that we're bringing that we're actually facilitating for them. We're just not specifically doing the bookkeeping. And so that is a drastic cost reduction from a management perspective that allows us to be as affordable as we are, and truly just value the services from a day-to-day operational standpoint.
So you're truly a co-host. So there, you're not
Yeah.
acquiring any expenses on the behalf. You're not doing the accounting. So I used to, when I very first started my business, I did that. I just switched it up. Not to say that there's a right or wrong way, but I would
Right.
do the same thing. So you're saying you have 60 properties, but each person, you have a credit card on file. And when you buy stuff on Amazon and ship it to the house, however you do your operations,
Right.
you're charging them and then attaching a receipt to like their Google Drive or whatever.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So simplifies a little bit. Also kind of for the majority of our clients, they actually like requested it up front. And that was one of the reasons why we went that route, because a lot of them are coming to us from being self-managed or from other third-party managers and saying, I don't have any insight into anything. Transparency was super big as far as like a pain point for a lot of the clients we were bringing on board. And so for them, and you have to remember, the majority of the people that I worked with up front were asset managers. And so for them, a good way to track all of this stuff is to track this. They're tracking it anyway. So rather than paying me to track something that they're tracking outside of my services anyhow, I just reduced our overall expense and allowed them to continue doing so. And I haven't run into a problem with it across anybody. In fact, the majority of them have actually really loved that idea. And it allows me to have a much more in-depth conversation, back to your point about the obstacles and like poking holes in it and stuff. When they come to me and say, I'm not making any money, or I am making a great amount of money, how do I boost this? In fact, that's the majority of my conversation, to be quite honest with you. What else can I put into this property to maximize my return on investment? And I go through, and it's a much more informed decision. It's so difficult, I feel like, to be like full service management and say, you need to put a hot tub in, and it's going to cost you $5,500, and it's going to generate about 18% ROI. And they're going to say, what in God's name are you talking about? And instead, I can have a very informed discussion to say, okay, well, right now, if I buy $5,500, you're telling me that I can make my year back on that within the next, 3.5 years. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm saying. And they're informed on it and they know how it impacts their business. And I think that as a whole, they're asking me, is this impacting it on the revenue standpoint, the occupancy? What's the weighted, benefit to each of those variables? And for me, it allows us to have a true relationship as a co-host. We really get to actually talk with one another, as business partners. So for me, it's a little bit more of a cerebral connection, I guess, directly to our clients rather than, why am I empty in January? And then I, have to have the same conversation with every other manager saying it's 24 degrees. Otherwise, yeah, you're booked out for all the events like Chili Fest and Shrimp Fest and stuff like that. So
your clients own the accounts to like Airbnb and VRBO. They have the listing and you're attached as a co-host, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my follow-up question is how do you view that? One thing that irritated the shit out of me, just full transparency, was that specifically is clients going through messaging and it's like that parent looking over your shoulder. Anyone that's listening to this that denies that doesn't bother them is lying. But I'm just how do you deal with that? It's feel like you're trying to please the guests at one point. You're also got the owner of the property watching what you're doing and keeping eyes on your deal. Do you have somebody doing that for you? Is it a problem? Do you just earn their trust over time? How do you manage that?
Yeah, up front, it's real challenging, right? But the way that I explain it to them, it's primarily an educational thing. It is the bulk of it. So at the end of the day, what I'm attempting to achieve is to provide an experience to two different people. Our company is called Pacific, not because we like the ocean. If anything, it would be the Gulf, right? Because we're way closer to it. It wouldn't make any sense. But the actual definition of Pacific is peaceful with intent and character. One of the big reasons that I got into this was because as a local to the island, my family's been on the island for 3 generations. And so as a whole, what I've noticed is the majority of the economy is supported by tourism. But the locals get super frustrated when short-term renters, Kappa Kappa weekend, Jeep weekend, whatever you want to, all these different events that draw tourism from all over the state, let alone the country. They're coming in, they're using Galveston as their playground, trashing this place, blah, 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 blah. So the whole goal for us was to actually bridge that gap between both locals, hosts, and guests. And so this is an integral part of our business. You're absolutely right. It is much more challenging because they see these things and they say, why would you tell the guest, I don't know. You could say, why would you tell the guest about, this place being closed if instead you could talk about this place over here? Like we gave recommendations on restaurants one time. And in particular, why would you recommend them to this place in particular where it has lower reviews than this place? Well, I know as a local that they're closed down for the next 2 weeks for renovation. And so for me, I get to bring that aspect. And it's little really idiosyncrasies like that where the owner's like, why would you say that? And I have to go then and educate them on why I'd say that. And it becomes a debate. And it's a two-way street, right? Because I'm getting feedback on how to become better quickly. But I'm also being challenged and have to educate on the other aspect. So I think maintaining an open mind is probably the only way to go about that. Because otherwise, if you don't, it is, it can become very annoying very quickly. But I have had very difficult owners in the past that challenge every single aspect of what we do. And they have attempted to self-manage. And they typically end up, calling and asking for advice and stuff like that in the most polite way I can put that pretty much. And that's fine. I think that, just for context, I also work with a multifamily property manager, and we manage over 3,100 units across Houston. And so a big part about this, right, is that every owner that comes in says, I bought this building because I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing, etc. And they do for truthfully, they really do know what they're talking about. They do know what they're doing for the most part. But at the end of the day, what property management does is optimize the performance. And sometimes that means going outside of the vision of how to get there than the owner themselves. And it requires education. And there are some times where there's 2 ways to skin a cat, and I think that in some instances, it's better for some owners to self-manage. whether they identify that it's not something they want to do anymore or not. And in other scenarios, they identify this is a lot of work. I think out of everybody we've ever worked with, 99% of them have said, I don't know how you put up with it. There's so much continual messaging, and they ended up appreciating exactly what we bring to the table in multiple aspects, but definitely on the guest messaging side.
Yeah, I think you've reached a level of patience that, like, I don't know, man, that's pretty impressive. Like,
He's a fucking
pat
monk.
yourself on the back for that, huh?
He's a fucking monk.
Yeah, that's a peaceful. It's a peaceful guy right here.
That drive me nuts in a minute. What up, what up, what up, my fellow co-host bros and gals? This is Matt here from the Co-host Bros podcast. Look, STRIQ is insane. It's like Zillow property finding. I use this for comparables to show my owners. I create a comp set. I'm like, here, this is what it is. This is how I can help you. This is what I can do. But look, here's the deal. I talked to Matt Sanderson. We had a couple conversations, and I was able to get some stuff for you guys. I was able to lock it in. So first, I locked in a 7-day free trial. Any plan you sign up for, automatically 7-day free trial. Cancel anytime. Second, you want to go monthly because you don't want to pay for a year or for a quarter. Cool. Use co-host bros 10. I got you 10% off of that monthly subscription. But wait, if you want to go quarterly, I got you 15% off of that. So use co-host bros 15 if you want to use a quarterly subscription. If you want to go annual, first of all, the most biggest bang for your buck, cheapest monthly. Plus, I got you 20% off. Co-host bros 20. And once again, don't forget there's a 7-day free trial, and it's going to blow your mind. So why not start today? All right, back to the show.
Well, I'll give you a horror story just for funsies. I had an attorney that was at one property for a full month, and 24 hours into their reservation, they went and had a good time. A really good time at a client dinner, and they came back and they had locked themselves out of the property. At this time we didn't have a smart lock on the property. There was only a lockbox key, and it was 2 a.m. and my phone starts ringing, and I picked up the phone, and this was really early on when I had a few properties. I didn't have staff working for us 24/7, all that stuff. And so I was getting chewed out by the guest for them not being able to get in. And I said, okay, well, did you lose the key? Like, it should be in the lockbox. And the guest said, no, it's on the dining room table. And I was like, okay, well, why is it on the dining room? How did you even lock yourself out, on the dining room table? Like, how did you even accomplish this? And come to find out, they had left the front door locked. Went out the back door, leaving the key on the dining room table, and locked the doorknob, and then they locked themselves out. And they were just fuming angry with me and super upset that this never should have happened, blah, 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 blah. And the reason the reason I mentioned that they were an attorney was because what do attorneys do for a living? They tell everybody why they are not wrong in this instance and try to provide evidence and all of these different aspects as to why something is not their fault. And so that translated through the conversation, and they were pretty good at it. But the problem with the matter was I had all the evidence of everything that I was able to accomplish with them. And so, long story short, I had a key and I was taking it to them, but they said that they didn't want to see me. And so then I was like, okay, well, the only way I can get you in is if I do that, or if I call a locksmith. They said, I'd rather the locksmith. So I call a locksmith, but again, it's 2 a.m. And so the locksmith doesn't come out till 4 a.m. And so the guest, again, is just fuming angry with me because of these reasons. So anyway, long story short, all to say, I wasn't always patient with it, to be quite honest with you. But I think that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create a home for somebody, irregardless of how temporary it may be. And most guests do not come to rent a place that is equivalent to or lesser than the quality of that of their own home. And because of that, they're typically renting something that is superior in quality, we'll say, It's much nicer, has more amenities, stuff like that. And it increases that level of, I don't want to say entitlement because it sounds like a negative connotation, but truly they are. Like they're entitled to agree to superior quality of value. And that's what they're expecting. And so that's okay. And so once I started understanding that and kind of like putting myself in their shoes and stuff like that, I started kind of piecing it together and saying, I understand. And so now I would take that as feedback. I've got 2 other backup lock boxes, as well as a smart code now on that one and everything. And now when we get on board with new owners and stuff like that, I use that horror story to explain to them why it's so important to have a smart lock and stuff like that too. So it's those instances where I was able to create value with that of my own company, irregardless of how frustrating the situation was at the time.
Lawyers are crazy. They always just say they're going to sue you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like that too. Crazy. Like, let me figure out 15 different ways to like back this up. My wife's like, why are you installing lockbox? I'm like, what if the cleaner loses the keys? Then she has another set. And we gotta, so at scale, at 60 properties, with the locks, what are you doing? What are you doing with your door locks? Are they all the same? Are they all different? Like, are you just using a million different apps, or are you just streamlining the same lock? I mean, because at 60, I wouldn't want to have to jump into Schleg and then Yale and this and that and blah, blah, blah. Not that, I mean, you probably have a PMS, obviously so, but I mean, there are times you need to jump in, right?
100%. Good news is they're all really different. The majority of them are August and Schleg. But sometimes I I bring on owners that have had other third-party management companies that told them something entirely different, or they were self-managing and they already put money into the locks that they have. And those locks are expensive. I mean, they could be anywhere from like $100 to like $300, depending on, what kind of lock they are. And you don't want to increase the barrier of absorption for them to come on to you as a client. And so luckily for us, we actually have a pretty solid PMS system that integrates with a lot of those apps. And then basically we have it integrated to where we can manage all of the apps from one system, which makes it a lot easier.
What are you using?
Between the locks or the PMS?
No, as a property management
software. We use Hospitable. Hospitable is this software company out of, and they were pretty new when we started up with them. We were one of their first management companies that started up with them, but they really prioritize innovation across the board. And they initially were built for self-managers, actually. And then as we started scaling rapidly, especially with our co-hosting model, they started realizing that there was a whole different market that they were basically preventing themselves from being a part of. And as a result, they have really, really opened up the doors as to being applicable to different types of management, whether it's self-management, third-party management, full service, co-hosting, etc. And they've done an exceptional job. Probably one of the quicker innovators out there, I would say, especially for 60 properties. 3 properties is small, 60 properties is big in comparison, but 60 properties is really small in comparison to like 3,000 or whomever you might be talking to as well. So.
Yeah, Austin and I both like Hospitable too. So Pierre, if you hear this, just give us a little sponsorship. We'll take it. So we all like Hospitable here. I want to go back to your pricing model because there's some of it we didn't share that you and I had discussed when we met. So everybody knows how Tyler and I met. Tyler's an Airbnb ambassador, and he holds a meetup quarterly, and he has a co-ambassador, which is one of my friends, Chris Spitzenberger. Which is one of Austin's friends as well. Austin, you know him. And we went down there and we met him, I don't know, probably about a month ago or something. And he was telling me about his pricing structure. And my mind was just blown. And I was like, dude, you can make more money. Like, and then he's like, no. And I'm like, well, you should try this. And then he was telling me that he charges a percentage on certain things. So I want you to literally go into more about your pricing structure and like the direct thing and things like that. Because actually, I did think, me and my wife talked about your model the whole way home. And I was like, damn, it'd probably be good for like low performing properties because then I know what I'm getting every month regardless, things like that. But you know, because I just like to think things outside the box. How can I change it around? But yeah, explain a little more in detail about like what exactly your model, like, you know, you get the monthly fee and then you're getting a percentage on certain things. So let's, you know,
Yeah, I
break
mean,
that
the
down.
percentage, right? The percentage is really not for me. It's really for the property. And there's actually one of the things I want to touch on that Austin brought up about the marketing. Like if you're using marketing costs and it's eating into, you know, your returns. Well, truly it's not. So with the direct booking, well, actually, let me back up. Back to the monthly fee. The reasoning, like you just mentioned, for example, like that'd be great for like low performing properties and stuff like that. And I see it entirely differently. I see it provides
Right.
me an incentive to maintain consistent product, but also consistent improvement. So I have to make sure that that property is the same as they gave it to me. So the product itself has to be at least the same, if not better, than when they gave it to me. B, I also, in order to achieve long-term cash flow, am going to have to make sure that I'm generating returns for the owner. So I believe through a fixed model, I'm more incentivized than a revenue model. And the reason behind that is primarily because the first couple of months, you really don't make much money, percentage based or not percentage based, fixed fee model, because you're spending so much time and effort trying to learn a property. I just feel as though on a fixed model, and the reason behind this, right, is because in multifamily property management, they do charge a percentage, but they charge a minimum. And so in order to take on like a small basis property, they're very incentivized to break that minimum by outperforming. And so for me, I was thinking about this like, okay, like how do you make sure somebody doesn't want to turn this over and sell it off kind of thing? That fixed fee kind of allows for that consistency in product. And so for us in particular, I want to make sure I'm generating the returns because they're going to think to themselves like, okay, like my returns continue to grow and that's great. And again, like I said in the past or at the beginning of this, I try to add value along the way to like tier step over time. And so, and add value in different integrations as well. So that's part A with the fixed fee. On the direct booking side, the percentage, we don't charge commissions, first of all. But what we do actually carry out is we funnel out a portion of the gross payout. So most management companies will say like, I'm charging, I think right now I've heard, you know, even 40%, but I think the average is about 25, if I'm not mistaken, on revenue.
Damn.
About 25%. Yeah, I had a guy tell me that he had a big company in Breckenridge and he was charging like 40% of revenue. It was wild.
Yeah, but Costa charges 23 out there.
So
I mean, it might slide based on what the property performs at, but I know my last one was 23.
Yeah, I've heard even some local companies like I've heard 35% as of late, which
God, dang. That is wild.
But 35% of zero is still zero. So at the end of the day, I think
good point.
That's again why a lot of the incentive is with me, because another thing about our contracts, we have a 30-day out. There is no year term. So if you want to get rid of me, you can make that happen like that, which means that I am exceptionally incentivized via long-term cash flow to learn and study that property to a point where I can maximize my own margin within a finite amount. And that's really important. But other companies charge that gross revenue percentage, whereas for us, we don't charge revenue across any platforms unless it comes through our own direct booking channels. And the reason for this is because through our direct booking channels, the fees are far less. On average, about 15% more profit margin goes to the actual owner. And so what we do is we take 2% off of that 15% margin on the profit. So they still net 13% more. But what we're doing is we're allocating that to Google ads, Facebook ads, guidebook QR codes, like different like ways that we can market that property in order to refunnel like email campaigns, for example. Someone comes and stays with us through Airbnb, we save their contact information, and then we, you know, put them in our email marketing campaign like, hey, here's some of the different properties that are available during this time frame, which is also Chili Fest. They're typically booked, so come book it now. By the way, they're on like a 20% off or 15% off promo, whatever it may be. And it's maximizing the profit margin on what's being charged, you know, for the same, if not slightly less on some of the other OTAs. And so we utilize that as a way to create more value, again, for our clients, which is generating them more bookings on the direct side. And so, again, it's really not a commission to us at all. It just comes into this pot where we're pushing out ads directly to maximize the recurring guests that come through the top of funnel OTAs, I like to call them, like Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com.
It's an operational fund
exactly.
for marketing. So I love email marketing, by the way. So how are you collecting the emails at your properties? Are you just collecting them just from like the regular booker, or using something like Stayfi or Beambox or Google Form, or when they sign your agreement, or what?
Hospitable collects it all for you, the PMS system, and you can use a variance of different integrations. I think MailChimp is one of the big ones actually that integrates and will basically just like scrub all of their profiles. And so like if somebody books with you on Airbnb, you get access to their email and everything that's verified through their profile. And that's something that comes through Airbnb's own integration, elite integration with Hospitable too. So, but to be quite honest with you, Airbnb provides a different level of security for people. Like I would never, like all the time when I go travel and I call an Uber and they say, hey, like, don't know what y'all's plans are for the night, but save my number and call me directly next time. I don't think I ever do that. I don't think I actually ever do that. I always go back through Uber because there's a level of security that comes through Uber. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge with a property management company is establishing that level of trust and transparency, obviously with the owners. But the harder part truly is the guests. I know you stayed with us before, but I would say we have the same amount of recurring guests that come and book with us through the OTA yet again, that they save on like their wish lists and stuff that we do that go out of the platform and come with us directly. And that's okay at the end of the day, because it's really good to have them come over, because typically those recurring guests on the OTAs have farther out planned trips and they'll book farther out, and long-term occupancy actually allows you to generate greater, nightly rates for your clients. Because the further out you can generate occupancy, the more like demand you can actually kind of pump into your calendar, which allows you to generate that higher revenue at the end of the day. That rare find tag that they put on Airbnb and all that stuff.
You spent a lot of time crunching the numbers.
I love them.
I mean, I don't think we had somebody on here who's like as well versed with numbers. I don't know. We've had like a million. I don't know. I felt like we had like a million conversations in like the 2 hours we hung out. Every time I drive by that hotel, I think of you. Oh my God, it still looks like a shit box.
Yeah. We could fix it. It's pretty.
Yeah, we can, dude. We should. I don't know how. I don't know. They built. I noticed that the courtyard or whatever is like right next to it, brand new. I didn't even notice that before until I came back, and then I was like, oh shit. But yeah, we could fix it. You're right, and maybe that's something that we figure out at some point. So what are you spending? Like, what's your cost monthly on software? Like, what are you spending on? Are you using pricing
we
software
use Price
too?
Labs, pretty much same as everybody else.
So what was is that all the software you're using? What other software are you using?
So we've got Hospitable, Price Labs, MailChimp. We have some of our own proprietary stuff. I would say the bulk of what we do is proprietary that we build in house, and it's really just light work. It's nothing crazy. It's different webhooks and API integrations that we put into our systems that allow us to analyze stuff better. I mean, like if you were to use Microsoft Office or Google Workspace, and you can kind of build out from within, I would say a lot of that is probably the majority of what we do. And each of them are selected specifically because of the value that they bring and the efficacy. So let's just talk about the pricing structure, for example. I mean, the pricing system. When I was commissioned by capital groups and investors to go and do an analysis over the nation across like what were the most effective markets for both maximum revenue opportunities from a volatility standpoint. And volatility doesn't have to be just occupancy driven. It can be event driven. And so Galveston was one of those markets. Galveston was top 5, in fact, if I remember correctly, of one of the most valuable markets in the nation. And so when we brought on that commission project that I had to not only identify those markets, but I had to first start even further back and identify where am I going to collect the data? Where is the margin of error in this data? And so for me, basically a part of the commission cost was to go in and acquire subscriptions to each of these systems. And for me, across all of the ones that I tested, which was a lot, almost all that there are, Price Labs had the smallest margin of error from a manually verified margin of error when I was calculating it. So that's the first thing that I do when I bring on a system is I manage and analyze the actual margin of error that exists within that system specific product, which for Price Labs would be the actual dynamic pricing.
You tested all the pricing softwares?
Yeah, I manually verified them too, and it was pretty easy too because at the time I had a lot of friends that had Airbnbs and clients that had Airbnbs that I could just say well, they're suggesting that this is priced at this amount and it's not. It's about 7% margin of error, or this system says that it's this price, but that's like a 37% margin of error. And so I factor them in across different sample pools to identify what was the most accurate. And for me, Price Labs, when I did it was the most accurate. So even going in and just clicking on listings, because Price Labs and all the other systems would actually give you the listing IDs in the majority of them. So you can just look them up. And it's pretty easy once you figure out the URL, web address. So that was the first step. The second step was to identify the different pricing structures that exist. And with most of every software on God's green earth, they're cheaper with scale. And so the profit margin can increase as you grow as well, which is a really big, important aspect to understand about another reason why we're able to provide affordability with our services is that through scale, we're actually able to provide more value without really changing the cost too much, because there's still more upside to us just with scale.
Yeah, I think I don't think anyone's going to be calling on your properties, because if somebody called on them and was like, "Hey, if you have the revenue stuff dialed in and you're making your clients money, nobody's going to it's going to be hard for you to lose clients, because it's going to cost more for the traditional property management structure."
Yeah.
So I think your client retention is probably going to be, if it isn't already, it's probably pretty high.
It's very high. It's very, very high. I would say the two main reasons for client turnover would be the desire to self-manage. And this could be from people that say no, I want to be in control of the pricing. Well, that takes 90% of the value that I bring to the table out of it, because I can message guests to a T all day long, have 100% response rate, 0% cancellation rate, 4.96 star rating across the board, and do all these things. But if the pricing doesn't bring a guest in for me to actually bring that value to, that's my barrier point, and I can't really do anything from that point. And then the other aspect would be people that over leveraged greatly and need to sell in order to either break even or not incur a loss. So,
which I wouldn't even consider that. I wouldn't consider that as a factor in client retention if they're trying to sell the house. That has nothing to do with your service. I mean, people actually leaving to a competitor, not happy with their service, things like that. I was going to ask you, what is your, at 60 properties, what is, we're just saying roughly 60. What does your team look like? What is your, what's your team
it's pretty lean still. I mean, I would say that we're still not mom and pop per se, but we've got 4 full-time remote employees that operate the bulk of the business. And then we've got a boatload of cleaners, which are 1099 contractors, directly to the property's owner, by the way, but we 1099 them on their behalf through our operations system. The majority of what we do is partner with vendors, again, at the cost of the owners, which we mitigate for the most part, because again, that goes back to my needing to justify high returns. And then we have an in-house.
Who manages the, sorry to interrupt you, who manages the cleaning? So you're saying the owners pay the cleaners. Do they also deal with scheduling with the cleaners?
No, we do all of that too? In fact, they don't even pay the cleaners technically. Okay. We put their card on file. So when the clean's done and the inspection report's done and the inventory report's done, we check it, say, yep, good to go. And then we go ahead and process that payment.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then we have our in-house inspector and assistant property manager. She does a lot across the board, but the bulk of what she does is basically like guest says, hey, just letting you know, the overhead stove light's not working in the vent. It's like, okay, let's go figure out what that looks like. We put that in a problem. If it's not something that we can solve like right away and know what that product is, then our inspector goes, takes a picture of it. Google Lens, by the way, is probably one of the best tools on the planet, especially for like claims processing. Claims processing with OTAs is such a hassle. It's so difficult to get the quote or the price to replace something as fast as they need you to submit that claim. And Google Lens makes it happen in like 30 seconds. I would say that's probably the best thing, like free system, just for advice, like out there. Yeah, big pro tip on that one. And it's great too, because like, for example, we had decor and it was like this ceramic fish on a stick at one of our properties. And I was like, how am I ever going to find this replacement? And I was like, oh yeah, Google Lens. And so it was in the property's photos, in the listing photos. And so what I did was I zoomed into the listing photos because the cleaner had taken a picture saying this is broken in half by the last guest. I zoomed into the listing photos. I had saved a picture of the broken decor fish, used Google Lens to screenshot, drag and drop the actual like fish itself out of the listing photos, found it on Amazon for $35, submitted the claim for $35, and we were on our way. Claim was approved within the next like 24 hours and we were rocking and rolling. Guest wasn't upset at all. They were like, yeah, that's my bad. Just so glad that you found it at a fair price. And then the OTA was like, well done. This is as detailed as we need. Like, here's your, reimbursement. There was no issues whatsoever. Everybody was happy across the board.
It's expensive fish.
No, yeah, it's a bit of an expensive fish, but.
So the Google Lens does like what? Like you take the picture, it puts it on Google, and it'll find whatever product it is. It just figures out where.
It could literally be anything. I mean, we use it for the products in particular from like that standpoint. But what I can also do is use Google Lens. Like, for example, if someone says like, hey, Tyler, like I'm looking for better renter's insurance that specifically provide low deductibles or minimum deductibles, or maybe they give me a limit of deductibles and they send me in an email, like what they're looking for out of an insurance coverage policy for renter's insurance. I can actually use Google Lens to screenshot the email and it'll start searching the web for those kinds of alternatives as well. So I don't want to like minimize like its use case directly to like products, because it really does have more like use cases than that provide a lot of value.
Wow,
that's crazy.
So what's next for you, Tyler? Like, when are you stopping? Like, what's the plan? Is the ultimate goal to sell or just keep growing and all that? Or
that's a great question. So I got back from Portland yesterday, finalizing my real estate fund. And so the next goal and what we're actually going to be doing is utilizing our operational efficiencies to achieve that goal that I was telling you about at the very beginning of this. It's just to become my own real estate owner. But we know that we've been able to generate lots of returns for our current owners. But some of the feedback that I've gotten is, back to your point, Austin, I hate being a host. I just like the returns that come with it. They don't like seeing the messages. They don't like, oh my gosh, like they broke the handle off the door. Like for me, that's something that happens on a weekly basis. You know what I mean? Like little things like that, like little chips in the baseboard, stuff like that. Accidents happen. It's not that big of a deal. But to an owner that's so emotionally involved in their vacation home, they're thinking, oh my gosh, like what is going on? And one of the biggest compliments we get from those owners is, I know what happened at XYZ stay, and I just came this weekend and it's already been addressed. House is just like I left it. Thank you so much. But for us, taking that emotional aspect out of what truly is a business and an investment is really the next step for us. And so we launched Pacific Capital Holdings, and we're actually raising capital for investors to actually buy short-term rental portfolios, specifically to hedge them against one another. So one of the things that we talked about is the volatility of the coastal markets. No one's coming to Galveston when it's 24 degrees outside. But there are people that are coming to Houston in order to run business seminars or come to business conferences or coming to the Houston Marathon this weekend on the 19th in order to come and carry out those things, irregardless of what the weather says. They have to come anyway. So hedging the stabilized occupancy of Houston short-term rentals with the maximum revenue that comes from the properties on the coastal markets during the peak season is pretty much our next step, and to allow people to invest in those opportunities as well to get returns without allowing or ever needing that emotional tie to those assets themselves. So now I'm taking an even harder look at that hotel.
They're doing something on it, man. They had a lift out there the other day doing some sighting. It was raining too. I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? It's raining.
Yeah. Well, I know
But it looks like they just keep making it
I
worse.
was talking about a buddy of mine, and he knows the owner pretty well. I guess they've been talking for a while, and he was trying to get that valuation pretty much on the asking price that he continues to get offers for.
Oh, good luck to him, I guess.
A lot of luck.
Falls through enough, then maybe somebody will pick it up. Yeah, so we're kind of short on time, and it's been great. I mean, you've dropped so much stuff, and we can even go into other things, I'm sure, someday. But if you want people to follow you and things like that, just let them know where to find you. If you want to let them know how to invest in your, if it's possible, I don't know if you're doing certain kind of, they have to be certain accredited investors or not. But if that's the case, just, DM me or text me the information. I'll put it in the show notes. Other than that, I don't know if you saw, I'm just a selfish plug. I'm having a meetup in Houston on the 31st. So I don't know if you're available, but I'll text you the details
send me
later.
Details. I'd love to pop over.
So,
and the only way to advertise raising capital for a fund is if you are taking accredited investors. Just a little tidbit, and we are taking accredited, so that's a requirement. I'll send the details over to you, but other than that, staywithpacific.com is our website, and you can find pretty much everything you need to at that point.
All right. Well, if you're an accredited investor and you want to drop some cash, let Tyler know. But thanks everybody, and thank you again, Tyler. And I'll let Austin bring us out. Sorry, I got a text message over my computer. Damn MacBook.
Oh, you're good. My only thing is, I think Tyler, maybe we'll do a part 2 later on down the road or something like that. Just check in with you. Thanks for coming on and sharing that kind of stuff. I was looking at your Facebook page. It looks like in your main photo, you've got a pretty wicked mustache. So that will be a requirement for a part 2.
Yeah, you shaved.
I did. The 9-month-old's been ripping it off my face. But don't worry, I'm about a quarter of the way there. In a week and a half, it'll be back. Don't even sweat it.
Bring it back, baby.
Don't even sweat it. It'll be back.
I was wondering why you look so different. I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it'll be back.
All right. Well, we're out of here, guys. Thanks again, Tyler. And
thank you, guys. It was good to catch up.
The Co-Host Bros Podcast.